I have really come to assess with compassion the place that we are in as women and men. And especially to look at how, as women, we are competing with men because we've been programmed to do so by, in my opinion, the psyop of feminism. And we are also competing with women, right? So we're competing with each other, which means that everyone is a potential enemy, right? Which means that safety is anathema to our existence, and it already was by virtue of our biology. So no wonder, we're flailing and wired and exhausted and bitter and resentful and chronically disappointed.
Ever pondered the power of embracing every part of yourself, both the shadows and the light? Dr. Kelly Brogan illuminates this journey, revealing the transformative impact of integrating feminine and masculine energies for a more authentic life. She delves into the essence of self-care, challenging societal norms, and the art of navigating judgment with wisdom and practical exercises. From fostering inner safety to exploring judgment as a path to growth, Dr. Brogan offers insights into reclaiming femininity and cultivating self-compassion. This conversation is a guide to embracing your full self, providing tools for personal empowerment and fulfillment in a world that often urges us to choose sides within ourselves. It's now time to tune into this one very inspirational human being. Enjoy. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what side of the world you are sitting on at this very moment. We have another amazing guest for you. We have the beautiful Dr. Kelly Brogan. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here. So as we always love to start the shows, we always love to ask our guests, what inspired you to do what you do today?
Well, I suppose it depends how much I'd like to zoom out to answer that question, because I am a believer, as I know many are at this point, that I chose the particular challenges and experiences of adversity that I experienced in childhood so that I could enjoy the delightful alchemical potential of those wounds and really come onto the other side of that contrast. And so my mantra, if there is one, is reclamation, right? Pretty much everything that I am about these days on a personal level and a professional level carries that title. And the only reason that is so is because I had an experience, as so many of us do, and I would say particularly women, of feeling forsaken, you know, if that's a word I could put on it. And to have the opportunity to reclaim myself, to choose myself, to honor and cherish myself, to devote to myself, and in doing so, to find God, is about the most exciting adventure I could potentially sign up for. So I think it would track back to that point on the meta level, on the sort of more mundane level. I think what has inspired me to, I think, specifically work with women in the reclamation space is just like a deep love for women. I don't know. I just find certainly find men extraordinary as well, but I when I am in the presence of a woman who is alive and who is running, you know, eros through her body, whether she's singing or dancing or sharing from her heart, mothering, cooking, whatever it is, creating. I mean, I just am in awe. And when I am around a woman, sometimes including myself, who is contracted or rigid or in some sort of shape that feels hardened, armored, it hurts. Like the other day I was at a store. I was at the Apple store actually, and this is not an endorsement. And I was waiting, right? And so I'm like sitting kind of like quasi annoyed waiting for something, and this older man across from me gets up to leave, right? And he leaves me he drops me a note as he's walking out of the store. And the note says, "Smile, period. You are beautiful. God bless you." Right. And I was thinking, I was like, wow, first of all, I felt a little ashamed that I must have had like some sort of resting bitch face on. I don't know. But then I also related, to what it is to be around a woman who isn't animating that energy. It hurts. It actually does. And we collectively suffer for it. So to ignite and enliven and otherwise, activate that chain of inspiration that we as women can offer each other. I just can't think of anything I would rather dedicate myself to. And of course, the first point of entry for me was around reclamation from a system, if you will, that we consent to, that is really predicated on our own lockdown, our own imprisonment. And, that would be the allopathic medical system. And so a lot of my early work was focused on that. And more recently, I've become interested in how you can be healthy on paper, right? You can be off all your meds and diagnosis free and somehow still be in your patterns, whether it's in relationship, your patterns with money, your patterns with personal self censorship, that seems sometimes unaffected by the fact that now you don't have a diagnosis or pills or appointments to attend. And what is that about? And that's what really drew me to the exploration of shame as a liability, energetically, and as a tremendous source of vital force leakage, and so what we can do with that to further alchemize, right? Wounds into gifts of expression. And that's really been a lot of my more recent interest.
Wow, there is in so many different directions I would like to go with this, but I have to say you gave me goosebumps because it is about when you were speaking about the focus on you and reclaiming you. It's I find, and I'm not going to just speak for myself. I'm sure there's a lot of women out there as well. There's a real guilt component to focusing on you because it's almost like I know for myself, I've only just started doing that. And I think it's always been as a mother giving, you're always giving to others and making sure everybody else is happy. But the way that you spoke with such, I felt this real centeredness, this real groundness about you. Um, was there ever a time that there was a level of resistance, there was a level of guilt when you were going through, like, it's about you, it's about your time, it's about you embodying you?
Hmm. So I have played both the narcissist and the codependent, right? And I would wager most of us have, right? We might identify with one end of the spectrum more than the other. And of course, it feels way better to be the empath codependent than to be pinned as a narcissist these days, right? So we sort of victim coddle, in my opinion, a lot in the description of ourselves as empaths. And I mostly consider it all need meeting, right? So we have our needs and we meet them. We meet them manipulatively and covertly or directly. And sometimes through, overt expression. And sometimes we just are so focused on what it is that we need that we're like a starving individual who's been presented with a couple of crumbs. And of course, we're going to throw them into our face. Um, so the sort of early days of my self-care were pretty like spiritualized. I trained in Kundalini yoga and I developed like an interest in early morning meditation practice. And it was like rather lengthy, like 40 minutes or something. And my kids were young at the time. And I made it really clear to them that they should not like fuck with me during that time period, right? Like that was my time. And I was serious about it and I was legitimized around the claim on that time. As I became more interested in dance and in, what might be considered less spiritually utilitarian and more pleasure oriented, um, I began to like teach my daughters about the importance of that as well, right? So I created a field of legitimacy for that interest. And you could say, as I look back on it, that I was choosing to virtue place, wherever it was that I was aligning the goodness there, right? So like it's a good thing to meditate. That's why I'm going to do it, right? It's a good thing to take care of yourself. It's a good thing to follow your pleasure. Um, it's a bad thing to be a workaholic. Well, it used to be a good thing for me to be a workaholic and now it's a bad thing, right? So I have found myself like sort of attempting to navigate through an ongoing maze of good and bad dichotomy, like good and bad polarization. And in fact, a lot of my more recent shadow work in my life has been around seeing how ugly mothering can get when you insist, especially with teenage children, or whatever, tweens and teens, when you insist that you know better than them how it is that they should care for their body, right? In terms of nutrition or sexuality or their dress or, their relationships or whatever. Um, and it's like under the umbrella of like, I have experience and I'm here to tell you what is the good thing, right? So I think for me, interestingly, the harder work has been in not necessarily being like well identified with what my self-care looks like. And I think what I mean by that is like sometimes it looks this way, right? Sometimes it looks like I'm doing face massage, for an hour a day, and this is my priority. Sometimes it looks like I'm going out with a friend. Sometimes it looks like I'm trying to perfect a pole dance routine, for 4 hours in my living room. Sometimes it looks like sleeping until 9:30, right? Like sometimes it looks like watching TV. Sometimes it looks like not cooking dinner. Sometimes it looks like cooking dinner, right? And so that for me has been way more difficult than being the rigid good self-care girl. And I think there's stages. I call it the maturation of the masculine, right? Like I do think initially when you develop an awareness that you are out of alignment in some arena of your life, your inner man has got to I don't know if I'm allowed to like use profanity. And now I'm in my profanity
Go for
moment
it.
because okay. It's like, I would say has got to show the fuck up, right? Like your inner husband, your inner father, whatever you relate to, right? At different times, your inner king, like that masculine has to show up and take the wheel. And initially, what I've observed, because it's a spiral path, is that whether it's around your relationship to food, whether it's around your relationship to technology, whether it's around how it is that you relate to self-development, how it is that you are in your primary relationship, like that inner masculine shows up. And there are often very rigid boundaries that are needed, right? So I, like so many people, ended a lot of relationships between 2020 and the present day, right? Friendships, romantic relationships, etc. And especially with friendships or dynamics with family who maybe didn't see the same reality that I did, um, it was necessary for me to find myself by saying, no, this doesn't work for me. Sometimes even a louder no than that. And then over time, as my spine grows and as I begin to trust myself, my own discernment, and my fierce alignment with my yes and my no, right? As I stop saying yes when I feel a no, and I stop saying no when I feel an inner yes, then those rigid boundaries like really aren't as necessary because I've got me and I can be really anywhere and find safety. I mean, I certainly am not at that level, but I think that's what I feel is possible. right? So like, I used to, for 10 years, followed like an extremely strict diet, like a paleo type of diet, right? No gluten, dairy, and sugar for like 10 years. Um, and after a certain point, it was not an elective choice, right? It was a dogma. It stemmed from an ideology. And there was no acknowledging that maybe there might be a feeling that came through me, which ultimately did, years ago, where I was like, I don't want to eat meat anymore, or then 6 months ago, I was like, actually, now I do, right? And so that feeling is my feminine, right? Like that feeling is my intuition. That feeling is my inner, like mysterious walking in the dark type of navigation. And if I don't have an inner masculine attuned to that, noticing that, attending to that, then all I have is the rigid rule follower, right? But the rigid rule follower has a role, certainly in the beginning and for an untold period of time, until there is a readiness for the dynamic, I think, between this very prismatic feminine that's always changing and shifting to be able to feel safe, trusting that masculine to decide and navigate, depending on whatever is coming through. And so, yeah, I think there's an arc, and where I've arrived at now with like self care and putting myself first. I'm a big believer in what I call sacred selfishness. There's a book by the same title by Bill Harris. It's just was exactly what I have come to, which is that if you don't devote to yourself, you are incapable of actually attuning to another, maybe even loving another, outside of the realm of projection. Self-knowledge, self-intimacy is the foundation for being able to navigate and serve, others in connection. So, coming to a place where my self-care is really something I feel into every day rather than a more rigid rule book, for me has been more challenging because it means in every moment, with my daughters or whatever, I may be in a position to ask for what I need, and I may not have sort of laid the foundation for it being understood that this is important. However, if I was like this at the beginning of my self-care journey, I think it would have been a mess, like a total hot mess. I think for me and for most of the women I work with, there is that phase where you show up hardcore, you establish the integrity of your word, the power of your capacity to commit, your intention and execution, your follow through, right? And you have impeccability, you develop mastery in that realm, in these masculine competencies, because then as they soften, as they become more dynamically responsive, you do so from, it's like the flexibility of a spine, right? Like you do so from the knowledge that the bones are there.
I love the way that you describe that. And I had a bit of an etheric slap just then. So thank you. Because I think that also what you were speaking about, and I think that's why I brought up about the whole guilt thing, is because it's something I've only come to an understanding of today. And I'm 57 and I have a son who's 30. So it's, for me, it's, I've always been the giver, and I love the fact that it was what meeting needs, because I call myself an empath, right?
Yeah.
And it's because I'm always picking up on other people's vibes. Oh, you know what? It's and maybe it's just a need, an unconscious need, without even me recognizing that it was a need. But it's for the first time last year, I went on a 7-day fasting retreat in Thailand, and that was the
Mm.
first time I've ever done anything for me ever in my whole entire life.
Wow.
And but also I had so many awakenings because I was on my own. I was just with me and my thoughts. And I had so many realizations that I have come back now. And I'm very much about me. It's about me without the guilt. But it took that extreme, going to that almost like a dark night of the soul. It was, I
Yeah.
had to go to that place and be brought down to my knees before I come to where I am today. Why do you think we need to do that? Why do you think we need to go to the dark to find the light?
Mhm. I would call it a pattern disruption. Like I would call your fast, or, I have a protocol called Vital Mind Reset. And that's what I've understood it to be. It's a pattern disruption of pretty epic proportions. And what is achieved through that is, and why it can feel like a dark night, right? Or give way to one, I think, is because of the disorientation and confusion, and the identity dissolution that can attend the disruption of our normal defenses. So when you said, you consider yourself an empath and you're like feeling into everybody's stuff all the time, right? One perspective is also that that's like enmeshment trauma, as it's like called in psychology, because, I certainly relate to that. And it's the well well honed capacity to assess and feel into what somebody else's inner world might consist of strategically, right? So the need you're meeting, and I meet when I am in that mode, um, is for safety, right? So if I can read the not only the room but the individual in front of me, and I can um, leave myself, right, sufficiently to enter them, then I share a reality with them. And if you grew up, like I did, then sharing a reality with your parent, colluding, with them is way safer than attempting to assert yourself as an individual, right? That, with different feelings and different thoughts. That was not a safe strategy for most of us in childhood. So to disrupt these patterns leaves us momentarily defenseless, right? Like it leaves us without our usual strategies for securing safety. And that can be like terrifying. I mean, it can be horrific. Um, yeah, extraordinarily so. And so the faith that you make contact with in those ashes is that you will somehow rise again, and you don't know what that will look like. So there really is a moment of saying, like, of this sacred surrender, right? This devotional surrender, saying like, I don't know, but I feel it's possible that something perfect, could arise from this place. And that's often we call expansion, right? So the polarities of that contraction, and fear giving way to, this new, bigger, bolder version of self, I think that's the spiral, right? So it happens over and over and over again.
Yeah, I do. I feel that way. I feel like even though I'm only 5'4", I feel like I have grown quite quite a fair bit since that whole experience. And I have to say that also it's made me realize and how much I wasn't standing my truth, embodying what I was experiencing. So
Mm.
I was disconnected from the self because I wasn't really acknowledging that there was so much resistance in every aspect of my life actually, that I was just being a people pleaser and making sure that everyone else was happy. But it's also, I think, societal conditioning as well. You've got to be the good mother. You've got to be the good partner. You've got to. So I think there was, once you let go of all that and just center yourself, and then, and you need to, well, I had to go to extreme, fast for 7 days in the middle of nowhere, to actually just sit with yourself and actually embody
Yeah.
everything you are experiencing. Was scary, like you said, scary, like frightening, but at the same time, exciting. Like that dichotomy of that light and dark. It's almost like there was moments of darkness, but in that darkness, I could see the potential light, which was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And that's what I think, a lot of the female shamans call like walking in the dark, and especially our capacity as women to feel into that invisible light. I think it's not even like a skill that we cultivate. It's like something we remember, that we are able to do and here to do. And I'm a big believer in like, this sort of chain of inspiration I referenced earlier between women. And I have had that feeling many, many times over in my several dark nights, where I feel like a woman's hand. It could like bring tears to my eyes just to feel the gratitude for that, like I feel a woman's hand in the dark through a coach or, someone who is ready to like support me in my creativity journey or just like, and it's not to say I haven't been helped and taught by men, but there's like a special transmission that I think happens that feels like, oh yes, this is this is the wildness that we have, and we cannot access it, and we will feel like we are starving and exhausted and just like dizzy with how um wildly wrong everything feels, until we can make contact with that again. And so, yeah, I mean, I fasted myself about a year ago, a year and a half ago, for 9 days. I did a water fast, and um, I mean, I have so much to say about that. However, what I will say is that I met the part of me that doesn't even want to be here. That is like I'm no longer interested in this incarnation, right? It's like, um, and I now I think of that, with my understanding. I'm a big, big fan of David Data's work, if you know his work. And, he talks about, in my best understanding, how suicidality is often a masculine impulse towards the void of nothingness that is relief from the pressure and chaos of form, right? And so to feel that nihilistic sense of like, just fuck all of this, um, if you don't act on it, and not that there's a value judgment either way, but if you don't, um, it can be an initiation, right? Because then you move beyond what it is that you imagine you can't capacitate, you somehow do, and your masculine matures just a bit more. But I will say that being with in the fast that I did, that I was by myself in my house. There was no reading or working or nothing, doing nothing other than sipping water all damn day long. And I don't think I've ever been with myself that way. I can be alone very easily, if I have a book, right? Um, let alone a computer and a notepad, but to just simply be with myself, as you're referencing, with no Dharma talk. I've done Vipassana too, no Dharma talks, no nothing. Um, it was a kind of hell. And what does that mean? Right? What that probably means is that I've been running from myself my entire life in all of these socially normative ways, podcasts and chatting with girlfriends and, making dinner for my kids and whatever else. Um, if it hurts that badly to simply be with myself unfettered, like I'm walking around with that reality right at the core of my beingness. And so again, I think of that as the masculine maturation, because to be present to what is, to offer my attention to what is, I simply wasn't ready, at that point to provide that in any capacity to myself. And perhaps because of that experience, not unlike your own, that shifted.
That's for me, I think about it in the sense that um when you were talking about the masculine and feminine aspect, and I think that my whole life I've kept myself so busy so that I didn't have to face the reality that I need to face, which is what took place. And so I used to always say, it's funny, we teach what we must learn, right? So all
Totally.
of this stuff that I'm teaching over these years is really something that I needed to put into practice. But it
Yeah.
wasn't until I took myself out of the busyness, which I now say busy is the new stupid, busyness, it it was stop doing and just be. And that was hard when you're just constantly running around, whether it's business or, podcasts or people or family, to just stop and stay still. And that is scary too, because then you're faced with your own reality and your own shadows and your own stories that come up and you think, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't have the addictive compensation of food. Like for me, that was I mean, that was just next level because silence is one thing. I haven't done a dark room retreat, but I imagine, darkness is another thing. Um, for me to strip away the distraction, the addiction, and the like genuine, authentic fulfillment that food represents. Oh my, I mean, it's just, I was on my knees. I mean, I was like fantasizing about like, Big Macs and, pizza from, 33rd Street in Manhattan. And I just like lost myself in the deprivation. I mean, it was just humbling, very humbling.
I love that. So there was one thing that I really wanted to talk about, which I saw on Instagram, is about reclaiming your femininity, or reclaiming the woman that you are to be, or even activating that female aspect, which I feel that is a really important topic for most of us, because I feel that, well, definitely the people that I work with, there's a disconnect. Whether it's a lot of women that I tend to hang around with, maybe it's my age going through menopause, they'll say things like, I'd rather, mow the lawn than have sex with my partner, or, you hear these, and it's quite funny, but there's meaning behind all of this, these kind of jokes that they kind of throw
Yeah.
out in the open. But I'd really love to understand more about that, and how do we tap into that aspect without, with grace, without the heaviness of being a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I have so much to say on this subject. And it's mostly because it's become, again, the focal point, as you're saying, of my process. And when that's where we teach best from, right? Is the authentic, uh, so sort of this like this liminal space, this little moment between learning something new about ourselves and wanting to crystallize it through sharing. I mean, I think, and especially as women, I think this is an essential part of our process. And it makes it more real for us as we do so, right? So, this is a lot of what I've been exploring. And in doing so, I have really created the conditions to confront some aspects of my conditioning that I wasn't expecting to look at, right? Including what it means to be a feminist, and what my beliefs are about marriage as a woman who has been divorced twice, you know, um, including how I feel about words like submission. And, I have really come to assess with compassion the place that we are in as women and men. And especially to look at how, as women, we are um, competing with men because we've been programmed to do so by, in my opinion, the psyop of feminism. And we are also competing with women, right? So we're competing with each other, which means that everyone is a potential enemy, right? Which means that safety is anathema to our existence, and it already was by virtue of our biology. So no wonder, we're flailing and wired and exhausted and bitter and resentful and chronically disappointed. And no wonder our bodies have taken these rigid, hard shapes, and no wonder we are expressing through myriad chronic illnesses and so-called autoimmune diseases. And no wonder every single woman who ever sat in my office when I was practicing as a psychiatrist in Manhattan had a deeply held belief that something was very wrong with her, right? Irreparably damaged about her essence, her very selfhood, right? So it this framework, right, helps us to understand why 1 in 4 women are medicated, uh, walking around with their relationship to their own feminine nature captured, by an industry that seeks to pathologize who it is that they are, right? Because I often say about psychiatry, it's different from other disciplines because, you can have diabetes and conceptualize there's something very wrong with your pancreas. I mean, your pancreas is a part of you. So to imagine that something is wrong with any of you, I think could be problematic. However, it's quite a different thing. It's a different caliber of dilemma right? For you to identify with a psychiatric diagnosis that says actually something is wrong with you, how you, right? Like your behavior, your cognition, your feeling states are actually maybe dangerous for yourself or other people. And then you open a prescription bottle every day with your name on it that reinforces this idea that, in fact, yes, something is quite wrong with you, and best to keep it under wraps and comply. So there's some deep sorcery, that we have the opportunity to engage with our own magic, right, and with our own capacity to play with these energies. Should we awaken to our power as women? And so, you might imagine, as I did, that the journey into a woman's, power looks something like standing up for yourself, right? And, proclaiming yourself queen or whatever. You might also imagine that it looks something like, I don't know, playing in the realms of rose petals and, goddess circles. And it's not to say there's a single thing wrong with any of, those approaches, right? If you want to be a girl boss, if you want to be a soft girly, if you want to be whatever shade in between and it's working for you and you feel fulfilled, um, fantastic, right? Like I'm here cheering you on. What I have found uh, is that I got all the things that feminism promised me. And I did all the things that a man can do bleeding, right? And better than many men can do them. And I arrived at this hollow space, right? This place where even the things I should be celebrating could be feeling fulfilled by, felt a certain level of emptiness. I describe it as feeling like I was living behind a glass wall, right? And then almost feeling confused, right? Like I have all these reasons to feel happy. Why am I still feeling something missing? Right? Like, what is it? Um, is it that I just have more and more layers of persona, like that mask is still on, and I just haven't arrived at my own authenticity? Yes. Like, yeah, sure, in part. Um, However, what I have concluded is that until we can confer safety to ourselves and our systems, not completely, not in every moment, but until we have enough of a sense that that's available, I don't know that it's possible to express as a woman, to align with our feminine nature and essence, um, and to really come into the pleasure of what it is to be incarnated in these bodies. And so, sort of the plot twist is that while we've been focusing on the rise of the divine feminine, right, my perspective has been that for very different reasons, both men and women alike have a great opportunity to strengthen our outer or inner masculine. And that absent that, there is no expression of the feminine. And I don't really know if anyone, men or women, need help expressing the feminine, opening our hearts. I think we need help growing our spines, getting in touch with our dark predatory energy, alchemizing it into effectiveness, in our lifescape, discernment, and the exercising of choice. And I really think that what I've observed is that a man who is in his masculine strength, dominance, and mastery always has an open heart, right? He can feel everyone's heart around him, right? That's what makes him a trustworthy man. And that a woman who has self husbanded, right? A woman who has shown up for herself and who has exhibited enough of an interest in defending and aligning with her felt yes and her felt no, is like it's like she's like a geyser you cannot possibly put a cap on, right? Like you don't need I don't need help, you know, bringing tears to my eyes, right? Like I don't need help feeling like the pleasure of my nails, you know, like touching my forearm. I don't need help femaling, feminizing, right? Like I don't need help being a woman. Um, if I feel contained and if I feel safety in my system. And so that's a lot of what I focus on teaching, you know, in women's containers is two things. How to self-husband, right? And how to show up for yourself in your masculine integrity. And I worked with my coach Whitney for several years and um, have worked through this in my own ways after being like already a very competent woman. So it's not the same as just being competent in your life. It's it's knowing what your needs are, how to ask for them, how to show up for your own feelings, and how to devote to yourself, right? As we were saying, so that your creative energy comes online. And for the creative energy to be given a wide berth, I think it's necessary for us to offer each other as women permission field. And, you know, I just recently had my first in-person event called Audacious Embodiment. And oh God, it was so extraordinary. And most of what happened, I brought 10 women who've held a hand out in the dark to me onto the stage. And these are some pretty unapologetic bitches, you know, and they stood on that stage and they gave permission to, you know, the women in the room to access dimensions of themselves that maybe they thought they weren't allowed to by virtue of their self-concept, their pre-existing identity. And I think we need to do that for each other. Right. Because if it can be in the presence of a woman who has more aliveness moving through her body, then I have a bit more permission to do so and to resolve the gaslight of self judgment for not feeling better about where I am in my life when in fact I have clamped down, you know, aspects of myself, put them in the closet, and then I find myself judging and competing with other women who are exhibiting that. Right. So it's like an inversion of that competition to say, yeah, there is a hierarchy, that can be very informative. And there are women around me who are more advanced in their womaning. And it doesn't mean they're more right. It just means that they have more permission to express themselves than I've given myself. And so a lot of the practices that I encourage women to do are around entering through the upset, right? Whether it's that they are judging another woman or they're feeling judged, and how it is that that can be an opportunity to make contact with a part of yourself that you might not otherwise have ever known was there. You know, the part that does, in fact, want to wear the red lipstick and the slutty heels, or the part that does, in fact, want to just be a mom at home, you know, baking pies. We will judge those women before we will meet the aspect of ourselves that has always kind of wanted permission to be that, you know?
So, from my understanding, a lot of it is the safety component. Because I have to say that even when I left in Thailand, when I left the retreat, for the first time in my life, I said, I trust you, which I've never been able to say. I have your back and I love you. And I came home with a sense of safety, which I have never experienced before. So, is that kind of like the foundation of what you were talking about?
Oh,
Safety is so,
100%.
yeah, yeah.
Right. And that's why I would wager that your fast was like a masculine initiation. First of all, it's a very masculine practice to begin with, you know, to fast. Yeah. And then there's almost like this, you can almost hear the voice inside as you're describing those words, like, and it's like, I'm here. I'm here. I've got you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so when you're talking about the judgment piece, we all do it. I mean, I still do it to this day, and I know that I'm constantly
Absolutely.
projecting, and I judge unconsciously. And I remember running a class once, and we were talking about judgment, and there's one lady said, "I never judge." I said, "Okay." And then when we had a break, I went up to her and said, "What were your thoughts about me when you first saw me?" She goes, "Oh, I did it." I said, "That's a judgment."
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we all do it unconsciously. It's just the way that we, I think, have been conditioned. So to not judge is a conscious practice, which takes, I guess, well, consciousness, right? To be in the present, in the moment at all times. How do you go about doing that?
Mm. Yeah, I don't have a goal to arrive at non-judgment. I mean, it's just not even something I would consider aspiring to, because I do think this is how we are built to navigate. And I think, if you take judgment and you add choice, you have discernment. And with discernment, you are assessing your yes and your no. You are exploring what's in front of you and you're saying, is that for me or is it not for me? And it's like a pretty uncharged orienting towards or orienting away from. It's not a pushing away. It's not a big fuck no. It's just sort of like, nah, that's not for me. Right. And it's that kind of orienting away that relieves you of what I call the erotic caress of the enemy. Because most of us who have public platforms know that, I mean, there are people who can't possibly hate us enough. I mean, they keep coming back and back and back and back. I mean, I have folks like who literally have been writing blogs about me for years. These dudes. And I'm like, they must be masturbating to me at night. Like they can't get enough of hating me. It's a very erotic dynamic. And this is big in the activist world too, where we get into these experiences of rejection it's just such an active, intimate uh, rapport, right? That when you can compare that to simply like, nah, that's not for me. You feel like, God, it's so liberating, right? And so when I can recognize my power of choice in orienting towards or away from whatever it is that is in front of me, there is not this erotic potential that judgment in and of itself by its nature has. However, these days I consider like judgment a playground, like when I feel judgmental of a man or a woman, which is every day, every moment, when I feel that inner yes, or I like that, or I don't like that. Okay. If we want to put it that way, I especially get excited about the I don't like that, but I also get excited about the I like that. Right? Because what is it that I am feeling in somebody else that I haven't given myself permission to recognize I might already have a little bit of, or maybe even a lot of, right? But the I don't like that is particularly potent because I can really come to a powerful neutralization around that which I've been rejecting, right? So if I don't like women who are sloppy or inarticulate or disorganized or late, or stupid or whatever, then every time I have that upset, I have the opportunity to meet the part of me that is really insisting I'm not that and that I don't absolutely have permission to be that ever. Or that you should be punished for being that, which is conditioning, right? Like that. Why is it that you aren't being punished for being that? Right. And I think this is particularly applicable to our experience of each other's sexuality, right? That a lot of us, especially if you've been religiously conditioned, um, or professionally conditioned, in my case, have the belief that women should be punished for quote unquote using sexuality or demonstrating or expressing their sexuality in a certain way. And in holding that belief, we ourselves are objectifying, those women and then complaining about how objectified women are, right? Like you're participating in exactly the warfare that you yourself are, you know, receiving like friendly fire from. So it's it can be a very exciting spiritual practice to work with judgment as an opportunity instead of attempting to like somehow transcend it or eliminate it or move beyond it, or even imagine that there's something fundamentally wrong with it, to begin with.
I love that. And I love the fact that you were talking. I mean, that takes a lot of accountability when you get triggered. That's shadow work. What part within me resides within me that I need to light up? And it takes also a lot of courage as well to have a look at anyone out there like you. I love the way that you put it. There's people out there that's been writing blogs about you, but once again, that just shows your level of, I call, intelligence, and intuitive intelligence, and understanding that basically what they're projecting, they're basically, it's a representation of their internal environment, and that hence why they're projecting it. So, and that's why it's really important for everybody out there that and we've all gone through massive changes since 2020. I too have lost family, friends, and so forth. Understanding that everyone's entitled to their own judgment, belief system, and then you have a choice at the end of the day. Do I choose to be part of this paradigm, or do I choose not to? And I love the way that you describe that, and so eloquently. Beautiful. Thank you. I am very conscious of your time. And I know that I think we're going to have to get you back on the show because there's so many things I had here that I wanted to unpack. But I loved where this went. It was very, very powerful. And I know lots of people are going to love this. So as we wrap up the show, we always love to leave our audience with 3 shiny golden nuggets. So Kelly, what would be those 3 golden nuggets or practical exercises that you would like to leave for our audience today?
Let's see. So I would say, well, one thing I was going to add on the heels of what you just said is that, so this will be number one, uh, is to treat yourself as a woman the way the most perfect husband would create the conditions for your safety, right? So, um, like when you talked about that choice that we can make, right? Like if I am treating myself as if I have a husband who's looking out for me, yeah, I'm a single woman, so it's easy for me to do this thought exercise, and who's creating the conditions for me to never feel anything but pleasure and ease in my life, right? He's going to make choices for me that are going to optimize that, right? So that means that I'm probably not going to put myself in situations where I'm just tolerating something or doing something because I think it's, what does it hurt to just do it, right? And your caretaker, your inner rescuer, your inner savior gets smoked out that way because you're no longer sacrificing your own needs in service of another, which is also another way of saying, giving to get. So treat yourself the way, your perfect husband would. And the second would be to what's called, like what I call enter through the upset, like to really commit to, again, that's that masculine virtue, to prioritizing your felt experience as being your oracle, right? So when you feel a kind of way, you get an email, you have an interaction, you see something, can you find a private space, literally go in a bathroom if you're at a restaurant or, close your laptop if you're just sitting at your desk and you got a shitty email and set a timer for 30 seconds, actually, okay? And simply track and attend to with interest whatever is happening sense-wise in your body. And, if you want, you can ask your body, like, what is it that you want now? And you might find, that your body wants to take a shape, right? Often when I do this practice, I find I want to like curl up in a ball. Um, or I have like a fight or flight activation and my body feels freezing cold. Or, I need to just like lay down for a minute. So starting to build trust with our bodies by interesting ourselves, again, that attending masculine, in what it is that is needed or wanted or what shape the body wants to take is, I think, building the bridge, that we can walk across to come home to ourselves. Um, and then I would say, yeah, the last one would be what I call wearing the villain crown, which is what we talked about. So taking the opportunity to really experience yourself as bad and wrong. So if somebody is judging you or criticizing you, be it family or Instagram, uh, commenter, can you try it on? Just put the crown on, wear it for a little bit, see what it's like to be the villain. None of us actually want to play the villain in our stories, right? We always want to be the victim or the hero, the victim or the savior, but it's important to feel into all the dimensions. And it's that reclamation of that predatorial energy, that capacity to be bad and wrong, and really almost like honestly revel in it a bit, right? Like, yeah, maybe I am an asshole. Maybe I am a narcissist. Maybe I am, right? Like an attention seeking whore, right? Maybe I am, I'm trying to think of things people have said to me, like a bad dancer, right? Maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. It could be true. And if you're in rhetorical dynamic with somebody, you could offer something like, maybe you're right. You're not saying you are right. Saying maybe you're right, or I'll consider it. Right. And to come into that place, it's the hardest work there is. I'm making it sound really trite, but it's actually like literally the hardest work there is because of our conditioning and societal programming. And it is the most liberating because you are alchemizing shame. And in doing so, you make contact with almost an immediate reservoir of creative energy that will make it worth it. So worth it that every time somebody judges you or tells you that you should be womaning differently, you will get this little mischievous smirk on your face and you'll be excited to allow it to be true for just a moment and see, what comes of that neutralization.
I love all three. And I was just about to say before, so apologies if I interrupted, was it's a great way to diffuse any kind of conflict. And I mean, they're like the archetypes that you talk about. And it's good to try on the different archetypes that are a part of who we are. And whether you want to label them good or bad, I don't like to say it's good or bad. It's just an experience, right? And once you allow
Totally.
yourself to experience whatever has been presented, like I said, that's how we alchemize it. That's how we expand our consciousness as well. So,
Totally.
Kelly, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth of wisdom and everything that you do. Definitely have to get you back on the show. Thank you for your time and your energy. Thank you.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you for this lovely conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.